What's good? What's happening? This is Johnny Rocket. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to make a follow-up to my last video where I described the 3D sound field. I want today to describe the general essence of the tools of mixing. All the plugins we deal with, EQ, compression, and gating in particular, are the main utility plugins that we have in our arsenal, and they really are all volume control in their own ways, and that makes their utility it makes it less intimidating once you can understand what these plugins are doing. And if in this visual I hope that I'm going to build today on my trusty whiteboard thingy app, I'm going to try to build you a visual of the second part of how I mix visually, I guess. To summarize real quick, when we're mixing, doing live sound, whatever, when we're building a balance, we want everything in this 3D sound field to have its own space. And so when we bring up the instruments, we have the 3 dimensions here to be able to do that, to be able to manipulate the sound field. The left to right dimension is, let me get my little marker here, is panning, and our top to bottom dimension is frequency, and that is most effectively controlled through composition. So like a really good song has a very good balanced frequency spectrum, and it may be very hollowed out at a certain point, very minimal instruments playing a very light harmony in the high end, and then all of a sudden when all the instruments come in, think an orchestra, all those instruments complement each other, so they build the balanced frequency range themselves, and that's what the composers all play with. So they have their own ways of controlling the balance. Like a really good musician has control of their dynamics in a very pleasing way that makes them mix themselves. So that's really good. But you have EQ. That's the main tool of mixing for top to bottom dimension in a nutshell. And then you have volume for your front to back dimension. And that is compression and gating in a very technical sense. The compression stabilizes the movement in this 3D sound field, and or exaggerates the movement. If you want to exaggerate the punch of a kick drum, then it would exaggerate that movement, or stabilize its movement, like in a vocal where you want it to be up front consistently. So compression and gating are very, I could have done this in the last video too, but I wanted to separate these two visuals because the other visual I have in regards to this is just basically this same thing turned on its side. So let's turn it on its side. This will help you. I mean, the EQ plugins that you'll load up on any console or anything like that, or any computer, it gives you a frequency spectrum from left to right, and you manipulate that spectrum with bells and shelves and different stuff like that. So I'm not going to get into the details of any of these plugins because you can find that on every other channel. This type of crap's hard to come across, though. It's very hard to describe, but hopefully this visual helps. So we just essentially turn this on its side now to where our volume is top to bottom, our frequency is left to right. This helps when we pull up faders and stuff also, because look, as we pull up a fader, we're pulling it up. And so this is our visual from the fader level, or you know what I mean, from the mixer level that I can literally, that aids me so much. So we have essentially the surface of water here. That's the visual and the video. But all right, so here we got the surface of water that I have in my head, and that is, I guess technically you can say, is the front of the speaker. It's like the speaker cap. And it lines up because a speaker is pushing waves in a very real sense. So when you have an unbalanced frequency spectrum, then you have a speaker that's trying to push out a bunch of frequencies in a way that it's not capable of doing. And that's because you create standing waves within your balance, and you may create phase cancellation within your balance, and that is all water terminology. Let me help to flesh this out. So when you are in a bathtub, just taking a bath or whatever, when two waves crash into each other, they normally they'll just double their amplification, and I'll just use technical terminology here, but yeah, it doubles their weight. Like, it just basically sends the wave itself thrown straight up into the air or going up against the side of the tub, and that would be a standing wave in the bathtub. And then I guess phase cancellation would be when, say, the top peak of a wave hits a peak, or hits another wave that's on its trough, I guess. So when a peak hits a trough, it sort of just evens out the water. It just they cancel, the momentum cancels each other out, and it just flattens out the water. Now with the audio that we're bringing up, this type of phenomena exists, and that's what we're trying to combat. So with EQ, which is the first one I want to deal with, let me create a little fader here. With EQ, you have your EQ plugin when you load it. I'm just going to do a mock frequency curve here, because, I mean, that's whatever, but so here, so we have, like, say this is a kick drum right here, and in a kick drum, you have the fundamental of the kick drum, and you have the thump of the kick drum, which is down low. Normally, when you get a microphone, the microphone isn't going to capture that and translate it very well. So you have to sort of carve your way into it. So you would boost the fundamental of the kick. You might carve out the low mids a bunch because it's picking up a bunch of stuff you just don't need. In particular, with metal, you just need the low end thump and then the high end click. So you carve out your low mids and stuff to make room for your fundamentals, so it's more pure. And then you have your high end click, which you may mess around with, not just a simple shelf, but just a bell curve or something. At the end of the day, you have a general EQ curve that's like this, and that's what we're looking at here. Now, when you set an EQ curve like this and you pull your fader up, then when you get to the surface of the water, you have what is above the water. You have that is actually what you want to hear. What's under the surface of water is what you carved out, what you don't want to hear. It's really as simple as that when it comes to EQ. This really helps me when mixing together different instruments, because your level of precision with this is very much determined by, like, just when you sit back and think about what instruments may be colliding with each other, and then you listen to those two in tandem, and then you kind of mess around with your EQs to make space. Like I said, a lot of the instruments they have their space, and you sort of just have to tame stuff that's out of control. So you can do this in different stages, though. Like, a lot of the first stage of my EQ would be a utility plugin, where when I bring this up to the surface of water, of the water in my head, that's what I'm hearing is what I want to hear. It's when you have other instruments that create this surface, the water becomes more dense. It's harder to get stuff to poke through it. Say with metal, you have a wall of distortion you're trying to poke through, so it needs to be really dense, you know what I mean? So yeah, there's a lot you can really do with just the EQ. But then you have your compression, which it's a bit complicated of a topic, but I'm just going to stick with the threshold and the makeup gain, because those are the two really important knobs on the plugin that just helped build this visual. That's all we really need today. So say this is a vocal, and the vocal range in the chorus is right here, and then when it hits in the verse, it's down here. Say generally the song, it's at a good vocal range, but then during the chorus it hits very loud, and then it gets back to normal. So you have something with a wide dynamic range. Let's see what happens when let's lasso it. Let's see what happens when we bring this up to that surface of water and we get it to where it's up, to where everything in the song's kind of balanced and in a good space. You get to the chorus, and this is a lot louder. It's, you know what I mean? He's singing a lot louder, so all of a sudden this is poking out at you. And then and you're like, what? So now you have to turn it down. You turn this down to where it's in a good balance, but then when it hits the next verse, the verse is underwater. You can barely hear it. So essentially what compression is with your threshold and your makeup gain, it's a two-step process. You essentially, let me make this a little bit wider. You essentially would use your threshold right here, drop a threshold, and you would be setting a level by which when the volume goes over this threshold, it's going to turn it down. So it's basically like an automated volume control. It's like someone with their hand on the knob listening to the audio, and their attack and release time is just like their actual reflexes. You know what I mean? If they got really good reflexes, they got a fast attack and release. If they're drunk, then they got a slow attack and release. That's all there is to it. We're sticking with threshold and makeup gains, though. And if you were to pull the threshold down, you'd start turning down the top end. You would start turning down these peaks to be more in line. You'd be squashing the overall dynamics. But as you activate that compressor, everything gets turned down in tandem. You know, now you got this at the balance to where you want it. But then you would use your makeup gain to bring this back up to a respectable level. So that's the visual you need for compression. You're squashing this dynamic range. Maybe that's not enough. You need to squash it a little bit more. Use your makeup gain to bring it back up to the surface. And now you have like a very smooth vocal track that fits with the surface of the water. So let's spread this back out now for expansion to end the video, which is the opposite of compression. It's like when you're bringing a compressor on. I like to use this surface of the water as the threshold for the compressor too. So as I'm pulling down the threshold and the threshold starts meeting the audio source, you know what I mean? Like then you would be able to determine, like say with compression, you just want the peaks tamed. So over time, you even have RTAs on a lot of compressors to where you can see the peaks. And say you just want the peaks tamed, you want to smooth those out before putting it into another compressor that's like an LA2A or something that's going to smooth it out. The LA2A has a slow attack and release, so if you throw a transient into that compressor, it's going to upend this balance of the water. It's a delicate balance. You want to bring these audios up to the surface of the water, but you don't want them splashing around. So with compression, you have bringing it up to your threshold, and you have that. So now what about expansion? Expansion would be if it's the opposite of that. You're setting a bottom end. So when that level drops below a certain level, it's just going to turn it down even more. So you're adding dynamic range. And what I use most commonly for expansion for in, like say on a live stage, is when the vocal, say now that this main general thing is now your noise floor, and this is your level of the vocals that you want. So you would set a threshold right here between the noise floor and your levels to where when this vocalist stopped singing, which would be like right here, your noise floor, say he's singing and stuff, and the volume's up here, and then when he stops talking, you have this noise floor, and that's creating feedback. There's a lot of feedback issues when the noise floor hits the monitors or the microphone's picking up the speakers on, you know what I mean? If the volume's too loud, you'll start getting feedback loops, and you can use expansion to combat that, because all you would be doing is, when the vocalist stopped singing, this would dip. Your threshold would be about right here. So when the vocalist stops singing and it goes under this threshold, it's going to turn it down even more. It does this dynamically, obviously, but you can set the attack and release times to be very smooth and forgiving. Give it a little bit. That way it's not clipping off words. There's so much cool utility when you can visualize what you're doing with the audio signal using these plugins. So essentially now when you have it set up, you can bring it up to where you now have more dynamic range on the bottom end, that when the vocalist stops singing, that the noise floor is underneath the water and is not being picked up. This is pretty cool visual, man. I love it. I've met a lot of my friends that I do music with and mixing with. We nerd out about this stuff all the time because this helps you reverse engineer a lot of the plugins that you'll be using if they're more complicated. They do get more complicated, you know what I mean? So it definitely serves you well to try to understand in a molecular way what all of these plugins will be doing with the audio signal, and they can be summarized more or less in these visuals that I described. Like with the EQ, compression, and gating, it's a majority of what you're dealing with. Like a de-esser is a multi-band compressor that is just looking for the S's of a vocal track or whatever, you know what I mean? Most commonly a vocal track up in the 5K to 10K range, or 2 to 3K range, depending on a male or female vocalist. You just got to search for it, but the de-esser is literally just a compressor just on those S's. So it's turning down just the S's. The S's on any mic is going to pop up. You know what I mean? That's just a common problem. So a de-esser would be just a compressor on those S's. So you can nerd out as much as you want with this. If you have any questions or if you want to nerd out with me, just hit me up in the comments, man. I love talking about this stuff. I hope this visual served you well. I'm pretty sure I covered all I wanted to cover. The EQ, compression, and the expansion are all volume control. And at the end of the day, you're trying to get everything to play nice on the surface of a water in your head. There you go, you're a pro. Like and subscribe if you wanna. You don't really have to. I'm not pressuring you, but it'd be super awesome if you did that. I'm just saying.